This is my second time attempting to film this tutorial, and hopefully this goes a lot better. Hey everyone! In this video today, I want to show you guys how to make this really awesome sort of geometric spiral kind of friendship bracelet. This video is probably going to be on the longer side because the pattern before it repeats itself is in this whole chunk right here, because you have this sort of wave spiral right here, and then in the next chunk it flips. So hopefully you guys enjoy this. I wouldn't say that this is a super complicated pattern to make, but it's not really beginner friendly either. If you know how to read patterns pretty well, and if you know how to confidently make forward and backward knots, then I think you could follow along with this okay, because I'm going to try to explain this the best way possible for you. That also might be a little less efficient, so if you find a quicker way to knot this up while you're working on it, then that's perfect. So for this pattern, you need 6 different colors. So I am going to opt for a gradient. I don't really work with green, and I thought this was a great color palette to work with. And hopefully it'll help for the tutorial as well to keep track of your string numbers. And you will need 2 strings for each color here. So if you want to have a loop at the top like this bracelet, you want to measure out about 35 inches, hold on to your halfway point, and then measure it a second time so that you have a loop of strings. Or if you want to make just ties on both ends, make sure that you measure 2 strings for each one at 35 inches, and that is going to get you about a 6-inch bracelet, maybe even a little more. Just work with a length that is perfect for you. So for this bracelet, I started on my first attempt. I just made a regular teardrop loop, and you can find a video in the top right corner, but I love the continuous teardrop loop depending on the pattern sometimes, and I'm not going to show you guys how to make this loop. Instead, I want you to click on the top right corner again where you can find pattern and crafts tutorial on this. I think it is an amazing tutorial, and I don't want to steal her credit. So if you want to learn how to make either of these loops, make sure you check the top right. So with this pattern, like I said, I want to work with a gradient. So from the outside to the middle, you're going to order your strings 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So when you're holding onto your color palette, you want to determine your light to dark. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So starting off the pattern, we are going to take our outermost left and right strands, which should be number 1 or your lightest strand if you are working a gradient, and we're going to bring them to the middle. So just like your regular chevron on the left side, we are going to take our string and do forward knots across all 5 of the strings to the right of it to bring it to the middle. And then we're going to move over to the right side, and with our outermost right strand, we're going to do backward knots across all 5 strings to the left of it to bring it to the center. And then make sure to take your middle 2 strands and tie a forward knot with them so that we completely close up that row. And now we are going to just focus on the left side for now. And we are essentially increasing our knots on the left side with each strand, and we're bringing all of our strands towards the left. So because of that, color number 2 is going to be kind of carried towards the center while we make knots with the rest of the strings. So you're going to take your second strand from the left and do a backward knot onto that strand to the left of it. Put that off to the side, and we're still holding on to this strand number 2. Like I said, it's going to get carried over. So we're going to pick up the next strand in line, our third strand from the left, and we're going to do backward knots across the next 2 strands to the left of it. And then we're going to come to our 4th strand from the left and do backward knots onto the next 3 strands to the left of it. And then we'll move over to the next strand in line. You can see where we kind of have this gap where there are no knots. So that's how you know which strand to move to next. We're going to pick up the 5th strand from the left, and we're going to do backward knots onto the next 4 strands to the left of it. And then while we are here, we are going to go ahead and pick up our 6th strand from the left, which is in the center. And if you're following my gradient palette, it's going to be your lightest strand. And we are going to do backward knots across all 5 strings to the left of it. And now we are going to move over to the right side. So take this group of strands and just put them off to the side for now because we won't be working with them and it'll just be easier to keep those out of the way. And now on the right side, we are still going in the same direction. We're going to go from right to left, but this time we're going to go from 4 backward knots to 1. And the reason why we're not doing 5 like we did on this side is because that's what this chevron piece did for us. So we're going to take our outermost right strand and we are going to do backward knots across the next 4 strands to the left of it, completely avoiding this white strand. So really just put that off to the side if that helps you out as well. And now we're going to come back to our newest outermost right strand, and this time we'll do backward knots across the next 3 strands to the left of it. And then come back to the right side again and do backward knots on the next 2 strands to the left of it. Come back to your right side again and this time do a backward knot just onto that 1 strand to the left of it. And now we need to move back to the middle where our white strand is at, or color number 1 for you. And we are going to take that strand and we're going to do forward knots across the next 5 strands to the right of it to bring it to the right side. And now we are ready to work on our first sort of spiral section. So for the first half of our spiral, we're going to be doing a lot of inverse chevron work, but it'll be a bit of a unique twist on it, and I'll show you why. But first, we want to take our middle 2 strands, which will be color number 2 for you, and we are going to make a forward knot. And we are just going to do our typical inverse chevron. So with the left strand of your 2, you're going to do backward knots across all 5 strings to the left of it. And then on the right side, with our other middle strand, we are going to do forward knots across the next 5 strings to the right of it. And now this is where the inverse chevron portion is going to get a little bit more interesting. So we're going to come back to our middle 2 strands. We're going to do a forward knot with them as usual. And now every time we do backward knots on the left side, we are going to do them across all of the 5 strings to the left of them. But on the right side, we're going to start doing a sort of decreasing knotting, so to speak. So let's go ahead and focus on the left side real quick and do our backward knots across all 5 strings to the left of it. And now we're going to move over to the right side, and with our other strand of the 2, we are only going to do forward knots across the next 4 strands to the right of it. So on the right side, you're never going to carry your string over to the outermost right side. Come back to the middle again and make a forward knot with your 2 strands. And then on the left side, do backward knots across all 5 of the strings to the left of it. And then come back to the middle, and this time you're only going to do forward knots across the next 3 strands to the right of it. And again, come back to the middle 2 strands, make a forward knot. And then on the left side, do backward knots across all 5 strands to the left of it. And then with your other middle strand, this time you are only going to do forward knots across the next 2 strings to the right of it. Come back to the middle yet again and make a forward knot with those 2 strands. And on the left side, again, do backward knots across the next 5 strings to the left of it. And then with your other strand of the middle 2, you are only going to do 1 single forward knot. And then finally, to finish up the top section of our spiral, you are just going to take your middle 2 strands and do a forward knot. And now we are going to move on to sort of a lopsided chevron. So on the left side of our strands, we're kind of gonna go from middle to outwards, bringing our strings to the center. And then on the right side is gonna look more like your typical chevron where we go from outermost right side to the middle. So if you see here, your strings are going to be in the same order. So if you go from your second strand from the middle, it'll be color number 2, and then color number 2 on the right side is on the outermost right side. So if you like tilt it a little bit, we're bringing them all into the center to bring the spiral back down. So on the left side, you'll take your second strand from the middle and do a forward knot. And then from the right side, you'll take your outermost right strand and do backward knots across all 5 of the strings to the left of it. And then when your strings meet up in the middle, you want to close off the chevron with a forward knot. And so we just worked with color number 2. So when you come back to your left side, that's how you'll know that you need to pick up the next color in line. So this will be color number 3, and it'll be the 3rd strand from the center. And you'll do forward knots across the next 2 strands to the right of it. And then move over to the outermost right strand and do backward knots across all 5 of the strings to the left of it to bring it to the center. And then once your middle 2 strands have joined up, be sure to connect them with a forward knot. And then on the left side, you'll move over to your 4th strand from the right, which will be color number 4. And you'll do forward knots across the next 3 strands to the right of it. And then on the right side, take your outermost right strand and do backward knots across all 5 of the strands to the left of it. And then connect your middle 2 strands with a forward knot. And now we'll move over to our 5th color, which is our 5th strand from the right here. And we're going to do forward knots across the next 4 strings to the right of it. And then we'll move over to our outermost right strand and do backward knots across the next 5 strands to the left of it. And then connect your middle 2 strands with a forward knot. And now you'll notice that our string order is perfectly mirroring each other again. So our next 2 rows are going to be just regular chevrons. So we're going to take our outermost left and right strands and do 5 forward knots to bring it to the middle, 5 backward knots to bring it to the middle. So let's do the left side first. And now let's move over to the right side and do our 5 backward knots. And then connect your middle 2 strands with a forward knot. And then we are going to do another row of chevron. So we have now started back with color number 1, which goes into color number 6 in this order. So on the left side, do your 5 forward knots across all of the 5 strings to the right of it. And then on the right side, do your 5 backward knots. And then connect your middle 2 strands with a forward knot. And we are not done yet. How long is this video? That is only part 1 of the pattern. And the reason for that, like I mentioned in the beginning, is because in this whole set, the second spiral is flipped. So while the second half of the pattern does flip, it shouldn't be too difficult to follow the rest of the tutorial. For these next steps, instead of doing backward knots on the left and right sides like we had up here, we are going to do forward knots. So on the left side, we are going to be doing our decreasing knotting. So with our outermost left strand, we are going to do forward knots across the next 4 strings to the right of it, ignoring color number 1 here. And then next outermost left strand, we are only going to do 3 forward knots. Next outermost left strand, we'll do 2 forward knots. And then finally, next outermost left strand, we'll do 1 forward knot. And I am going to come back to the middle and pick up our color number 1 strand. And I'm just going to go ahead and do backward knots across all of the 5 strands to the left of it, just out of convenience for the pattern. And now we are going to move over to the left side. And like I said, we're going to do forward knots, and this time our knots are going to be increasing. So we're going to pick up the second strand from the right, so that way we can do 1 forward knot. And just like on the left side clear up here, our second colored strand is going to get carried over all the way down. So we're going to pick up our 3rd strand from the left, which is the next string in line. And we're going to do 2 forward knots across the next 2 strands to the right of it. And then we are going to move over to the next strand in line, which will be our 4th strand. And we're going to do forward knots across the next 3 strands to the right of it. And then we'll move over to the next strand in line, and we will do forward knots across the next 4 strings to the right of it. And then finally, our next strand will be our first color here, just right in the middle, and we will do forward knots across the next 5 strings to the right of it. And now we are going to work on the top half of our second spiral, which is going to be more inverse chevron work. And we're going to be doing those decreasing knots on one side again like we did up here, but this time the left side is what will start decreasing. But first, we want to take our middle 2 strands and we are going to do a regular inverse chevron. So we're going to come back to our middle 2 strands again and make our forward knot. And this time with the left strand of the 2, we are only going to do backward knots across the next 4 strands to the left of it. And then on the right side with our other strand, we are going to do forward knots across all 5 of the strands to the right of it. Then come back to the middle again and do your forward knot with your middle 2 strands. And then on the left side, you will do backward knots across the next 3 strands to the left of it. And then come back to the middle, and with your other strand, do forward knots across all 5 strings to the right of it. Come back to the middle once again and make a forward knot with your middle 2 strands. And with the left strand of the 2, this time you will only do backward knots onto the next 2 strands to the left of it. And then on the right side, you'll do forward knots across all 5 of the strands to the right of it. Come back to the middle once again and make a forward knot with your middle 2 strands. On the left side this time you'll only do 1 backward knot. And then on the right side, do forward knots across all 5 of the strands to the right of it. And then finally, for the last of this inverse chevron, you'll just take your middle 2 strands and do a forward knot. And now we are finally at the last bit of our pattern. So like before, we're going to do chevron work to close off the second half, but this time it's going to be flipped. So on the right side, we are going to be doing our sort of increasing knots to bring it to the center here. And then on the left side, we'll just go from the outermost left side and do the same knots to get to the middle. So on the right side first, I'm going to take my second strand from the middle, which will be our color number 2 here, and we're going to do a backward knot. And then on the left side, like I said, we're going to do forward knots across all 5 of the strings to the right of it. And then once our strings have met up, we can join them with a forward knot. And now back on the right side, we're going to pick up the third strand from the middle and do backward knots across the next 2 strands to the left of it. And again, outermost left side, we'll do forward knots across all 5 of the strings to the right of it. And then once those strings have met up in the middle, connect them with a forward knot. And we are going to move over to our 4th strand from the middle. And we are going to do backward knots across the next 3 strands to the left of it. Then on the left side, do your forward knots across all 5 of the strings to the right of it. And then once your strings have met up, in the center, connect them with a forward knot. And now we'll move over to our 5th strand from the middle on the right side and do backward knots across all 4 strings to the left of it. And then on the left side, do forward knots across all 5 of the strands to the right of it. And then connect your middle 2 strands with a forward knot. And like before, as you can see, our strings are now equal on both sides. So with my outermost left and right strands, I'm going to do a regular chevron. So on the left side, do forward knots across all 5 strings to the right of it. And then on the right side, do backward knots across all 5 strings to the left of it. And then connect your middle 2 strands with a forward knot. Finally, this pattern is completed. Now on the first set, I did the second chevron with the white strands, but I'm leaving it off here because if you need to follow the video over again from the beginning to start repeating all of the set over again, it will be seamless. So the beginning of the video, if you remember, I did a chevron with the white strands, so that's why I'm stopping it exactly right here. So if you need to go back and watch the video again, just to follow along with everything that we did today, there won't be any confusion. So I want to thank you guys so much for watching this incredibly long video today. Hopefully I can cut it down to a reasonable amount. If you want to check out my previous video, you can go ahead and check it out right there, or you might like this one. Thank you guys so much for watching again, and I'll see you in the next one.